Hello and welcome to Archaeology 101. Today I'll be giving a crash course on how the Neolithic Revolution permeated through Europe, stemming from the Middle East, or the Near East as it's described in European archaeology, and goes all the way to the British Isles. There are various models on how early farming spread, which I won't discuss here as they're a whole topic by themselves. But just to let you know, there is no one consensus currently of how farming spread. But what is easier to ascertain, however, is a rough date on where and when the Neolithic Revolution began. It is believed that farming first began in the Fertile Crescent in the Lebanon, Israel, and Syria sort of region about 20,000 years ago, which is known as the Epipaleolithic, where the groups of people living in this area at the time were dubbed Natufians, who were, strangely enough for the time, sedentary, whereas most other hunter-gatherers at the time were all mobile. But these were sedentary people who started building houses, and they also began processing wild cereals from about 20,000 BC. The process really took off, however, around 11,000 BC, which is where you start to get Neolithic sort of aspects. And the domesticated forms of cereals began to appear about the mid-9th millennium BC, and quickly a select few species of wheat, barley, and legumes became staple domesticates in people's lives in the Fertile Crescent. The domestication of animals roughly coincides with the domestication of plants, the exception being dogs, which had possibly been domesticated in Western Europe maybe as early as 40,000 years ago, although 20,000 BC is usually the rough number given, but that's an ongoing discussion. The domesticated animals humans started to consume, and ones we would really recognize in Europe today, started with the goat in about 9,000 BC and continued with sheep, pigs, and cows until about 8,500, 8,000 BC. Plants and animals are the essential ingredients of the Neolithic. However, heavy dependence on domestic plants and animals was a contributing factor to human sedentism on a broader scale, not merely just among the Natufians. Domesticates require consistent feeding and nurturing, and because of this sedentary lifestyle and the abundance of food most of the time, this ultimately leads to population growth. While there may be sedentary people, there will always be breakaways from these groups and people continuing to move to different landscapes and interact with other groups as well. And the concept of agriculture as an idea was able to be spread to other societies across the entire world. The Neolithic Revolution would break through to southeastern Europe around 6,500 BC in the Danube region, which is areas such as Bulgaria. Then a journey spanning 2,500 years would ensue, which would bring the foundations of modern society all the way from the Fertile Crescent to Britain and Ireland. However, this journey was very convoluted than some older and simpler models had us believe, such as the Wavered Advance model, which is quite defunct now. But a recent genetic study in Britain shows that the genetics of these ancient farmers showed two distinct migration routes. One being from Iberia, which is now Spain, which is where the bulk of people seem to have gone from. They've taken a Mediterranean route, a warm Mediterranean route from the Near East to Britain. But there was a small percentage of this study which showed that there was also DNA from Central Europe. This indicates at least two migrating routes and multiple colonizing events of Britain, which influxed the population from hunter-gatherer to pastoralist lifestyles. One of the most intriguing observations that we can make about the journey to Britain is that we can confirm how proficient the Neolithic farmers were in producing boats that could have towed or carried animals across the British Channel. Boats of this period have never been found. However, the estimates have said that they can carry up to 1,000 kilos, and they would have needed this as well. The quote-unquote wild breeds of cattle that are bred today, such as the Dexters, can grow up to 300 kilos, And these aren't even an exact replica for the cattle 6,000 years ago. These are still more slender than the domestic animals of then, but it at least suggests that a restrained animal could cross the channel. And even if there was just one or two animals, multiple events would have allowed a relatively healthy population of domestic animals to be imported into the country. The British hunter-gatherers, as we've already discussed, bred with the colonizers from the continent, and many of them, but not all, took up agriculture away from their hunter-gatherer lifestyle and accepted all the trimmings that came with it, including constructing different tools, pottery, and building monuments, all which had influences from the continent, but the local population molded it into their own interpretation, so it doesn't exactly resemble the continental interpretations of monuments, pottery, and tools, etc. The culture of the British Neolithic would evolve over its 1500 years, but domestic plants and animals would always be at the forefront and clearly made enormous impact on the worldview and traditions of the British inhabitants 6,000 years ago. Thank you for taking the time to watch this video, and I hope you all are safe and well, and I'll see you next time on Archaeology 101.